Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1. In this video we'll be building the dream driver pairing for each current Formula 1 team using the drivers that have driven for them in the past. We'll have all 10 current Formula 1 teams with their two greatest drivers of all time. A couple ground rules though. Rule number one, we can take any driver from the team's lineage. So for example, for Aston Martin, we can take drivers from Racing Point and Force India all the way to Jordan, but we wouldn't be allowed to take a driver from the Aston Martin team that was around in like 1959, because that was a different physical team despite sharing the same name. And secondly, if a driver is in the top two drivers for two teams, they go to the team in which they had the most success. So for example, if Alpine wanted to use Heikki Shaky Kovalainen for his time at Renault, but McLaren also wanted to use him, he would go to McLaren as he had more success there. With that being said, let's get started. And we start with Williams, and honorable mentions go to Nelson Piquet, who was the 1987 Formula 1 World Champion for Williams. He was also able to manage 7 wins, 6 poles, 11 fastest laps, 21 podiums, and 145 points from 31 races. But our top two are, firstly, the 1996 World Champion Damon Hill, who managed 21 wins, 20 poles, and 40 podiums in 65 races with the team. And our number one driver, a favourite of this channel, the 1992 Formula 1 World Champion Nigel Mansell, with 28 wins, 28 poles, 43 podiums, and Williams' most successful driver of all time in terms of everything. Now on to AlphaTauri, and for this pick we can also use drivers who drove for Toro Rosso. And an honourable mention will go to Danny Kvyat. Danny Kvyat actually had the most races ever for Toro Rosso, and in that time managed to get a podium along the way as well. But the two that we've gone for, firstly, we have Carlos Sainz. He's the only person in the history of Toro Rosso to score over 100 points during their career, and actually has the second highest average points per race in the history of Toro Rosso, just behind Max Verstappen. And the number one driver we've gone for is Pierre Gasly, who has 3 podiums, 1 win and a fastest lap, plus he has the most races with the team and the most points. We go across now to F1's newest team, Haas F1. And an honourable mention goes to Nico Hülkenberg, because despite only having 7 races with the team, he nearly has the highest average points per race anyway. But our two drivers we've gone for, firstly, we have Romain Grosjean, who in 96 races with the team was able to manage 104 points. But the number one driver, of course, is Kevin Magnussen. 1 pole position and 2 fastest laps for K-Mag. He had a total of 123 points and counting for Haas F1 team, and has got the highest average points per race in the history of the team. Going across to Aston Martin now, and for this team we can pick drivers from Jordan, Midland, Spiker, Force India and Racing Point. And for an honourable mention, we go to Nico Hülkenberg again, who had 2 fastest laps and scored a total of 289 points for the Force India team. And our first driver to make it onto the Aston Martin Dream Team is Sergio Perez, who during his time for Force India and Racing Point managed to pick up a win, as well as 7 podiums, 2 fastest laps, and 496 points. But our number one driver comes from the Jordan team, and it's Heinz Harold-Frentzen, who got 2 wins, 1 pole, 8 podiums in just 43 races for Jordan F1, and also challenged for the 1999 Formula 1 World Championship. Now to Alfa Romeo, and for this pick we can also pick from the teams of Sauber and BMW Sauber. Honourable mention again goes to Mr. Honourable Mention. It's Nico Hülkenberg, who scored a grand total of 51 points for the team in just 18 races. We also have a secondary honourable mention for Kamui Kobayashi, who achieved 1 fastest lap and a podium, as well as 90 points in 39 races for Sauber. But our first pick for the Alfa Romeo Dream Team is Nick Heidfeld, with 8 podiums, 2 fastest laps, and 169 points for BMW Sauber. And our number one driver is Robert Kubica, with 1 pole, 1 win, 9 podiums, and 137 points from 57 races for BMW Sauber. Now to one of the most legendary teams on the field, it's McLaren. And honourable mentions for the McLaren team are Mika Häkkinen, the 2-time world champion, as well as his 20 wins, 26 poles, 25 fastest laps, and 51 podiums for the McLaren team. And another honourable mention goes to Emerson Fittipaldi, who won the 1974 World Championship with McLaren, alongside 5 wins, 2 pole positions, 1 fastest lap, and 13 podiums. But the first driver on the Dream Team is Alain Prost, who won 3 world titles with McLaren, alongside his 30 wins, 10 poles, 24 fastest laps, and 63 podiums. And the number 1 driver for McLaren, was there ever any doubt? It's Ayrton Senna. 3 world championships for McLaren, 35 wins, 46 pole positions, 12 fastest laps, and 55 podiums. Now to Alpine, and for Alpine we can pick from Toleman, Benetton, Renault, and Lotus. But just Lotus Renault, not the actual Lotus team. Honourable mentions go to Nelson Piquet, who had 3 wins and 7 podiums for Benetton, and René Arnoux, who had 4 wins, 14 poles, and 11 podiums for Renault. But the first person to make it onto the Alpine Dream Team is Kimi Räikkönen, who had 2 wins, 4 fastest laps, 15 podiums, and 390 points in just 37 races for the Lotus Renault team, achieving a staggering 10.54 points per race. But the number 1 driver, of course, is Fernando Alonso, a 2-time world champion for the Renault team, 17 wins, 16 poles, 10 fastest laps, and 41 podiums, scoring a total of 468 points in 105 races for the Alpine team. We go across to Mercedes now, and for this team we can pick from Mercedes, Tyrrell, BAR, Honda, and Braun GP. And for some honourable mentions, firstly we go to Jenson Button, the 2009 world champion. He also had 7 wins, 9 poles, 2 fastest laps, and 14 podiums during his time with not just Braun GP, but also Honda and BAR. And our second honourable mention goes to Nico Rosberg, the 2016 world champion, who had 23 wins, 30 poles, 18 fastest laps, and 55 podiums for the Mercedes team. But the first driver to make it onto the Mercedes Dream Team is actually Jackie Stewart, who had 2 world championships with the Tyrrell team, 15 wins, 12 poles, 8 fastest laps, 20 podiums, and all that in just 39 races. And the number 1 driver for the Mercedes Dream Team is may come as a shock to you, but it's Lewis Hamilton, who had 6 world championships with the Mercedes team, as well as 82 wins, 77 poles, 50 fastest laps, and 143 podiums. And now we go to the team which has been on the F1 grid for the longest, the Ferrari team. And honourable mentions for them go to Alberto Ascari, who had 2 world titles for the Ferrari team, as well as 13 wins, 13 poles, 10 fastest laps, 17 podiums, and all that in just 27 races. John Surtees also gets an honourable mention for being the 1964 world champion with his 4 wins, 4 poles, 6 fastest laps, 13 podiums in just 30 races. But the first member of the Dream Team is Niki Lauda, who won 2 world titles with Ferrari, as well as 15 wins, 23 poles, 12 fastest laps, and 32 podiums. And then I think the number 1 driver on the Ferrari Dream Team is as surprising as the number 1 driver on the Mercedes and the McLaren Dream Team, because of course it's Michael Schumacher, who won 5 world titles for Ferrari. He also achieved 72 wins, 58 poles, 53 fastest laps, and 116 podiums. And the final team now is the Red Bull team. And for this one we can also pick from Stewart and Jaguar, but all these guys come from Red Bull. Some honourable mentions, firstly is Daniel Ricciardo, who had 7 wins, 3 poles, 13 fastest laps, and 29 podiums. Mark Webber also gets an honourable mention for his 9 wins, 13 poles, 19 fastest laps, and 41 podiums. But let's get on to our first driver in the Red Bull Dream Team, and it is Sebastian Vettel. His 4 World Championship wins, alongside his 38 wins, 44 poles, 24 fastest laps, and 65 podiums. And then, of course, there's only one person left to talk about, our number 1 driver on the Red Bull Dream Team is Max Verstappen. 2 World Championships, 40 wins, 24 poles, 23 fastest laps, 83 podiums, and a total of 14.34 points per race, which is the highest average in the history of the team. All that with so much more of his career to go ahead of him. So there you go. There is our 10 current teams' dream driver lineups of all time. Let me know which ones you think I got right, which ones you think I got wrong, and who would you change around and why. Until next time, goodbye.